Hi everybody, this is Ryan, and before we get to the episode, there's just something I wanted to address. In this episode, Andrew and I discussed the role of a Yakuza mob boss character, and we kind of criticized the role of the Yakuza in general as a plot point in this film. What we failed to properly address is that this Yakuza mob boss character was played by legendary Japanese actor Sonny Chiba. At the time, we were not familiar with him as an actor, and we kind of glossed over his role in this film. After the recording of the episode, about a week or so later, the news broke that Sonny Chiba unfortunately passed away from COVID-19. After his passing, we become more aware of just how important he was as an actor and martial artist, and the impact that he has had on film in general. His death is truly a tragedy, and he will be missed. Our deepest condolences go out to his family, his friends, and anybody who is simply a fan of his. May his memory live on, and may he rest in peace. Thank you, and please enjoy the episode. Hello and welcome to Franchise Me. I am Ryan.
And I'm Andrew.
And this is the show where two friends go on a journey to find the ultimate movie franchise. Each week we'll talk about a film or films in a series, breaking them down and seeing if they are truly worthy of being in a franchise. As we finish different series, we will compare and rank them among each other in order to find out which one is truly the best. This week we head over to Japan for the Fast and the Furious Tokyo Drift. All right, Andrew, here we are again. Another installment on the Fast and Furious franchise.
Number 3.
How are you feeling so far?
I'm feeling good. I'm enjoying this franchise more than I was anticipating, I suppose. Not that I wasn't disliking Fast for a long time, but I've definitely, to a degree, just haven't. I haven't seeked them out.
I'm not a car guy. And
exactly.
You're not a car guy,
Exactly.
and I always looked at them as the car franchise.
Right.
And I think that it's something we're learning that it's really not.
It's not at all.
You know,
there's more story and character development than you think.
I would say that this is actually the one that's probably the most car related. I feel like there's
Yes.
more. It plays a more pivotal part in the story, than the other ones.
It's literally about drifting.
Yeah, it includes a new style of racing.
Yep.
The climax of this is a race. You know, it's not a chase scene. It's not a heist.
Yep.
You know, it is a race, right? There's no major action sequences outside of racing.
Yep.
So yeah, this has a release date of June 16th, 2006. We are in the year 2006, and you can tell in this movie.
Yeah, you can really tell in this movie. It's 2006.
Directed by Justin Lin. This is his first installment in this
Yes.
franchise. Obviously, he would go on to do several. And I think, we'll talk about this a little bit later, but really kind of brings a new energy and kind of revitalizes this franchise. Screenplay by Chris Morgan. Once again, the first installment for him. He would go on to write many of these films. Starring Lucas Black as not Paul Walker. Sean Boswell. Bow Wow as Twinkie. Sung Kang as Han Lu. Brian T. as Takashi. Natalie Kelly as Neela. And Sonny Chiba as Kamada. Featuring a cameo from Vin Diesel. Spoilers.
Yeah.
Basically an all-new cast.
Yes.
What'd you think?
What do I think of the cast? Okay. Before we get to... I know Lucas Black is the star of the movie, but I think you and I will agree. It's Sung Kang. It is...
He has a presence about him. The second he's on screen, you're drawn to him.
Yes.
He's charismatic. He has a charm to him. And I think basically every highlight of this movie is almost entirely revolved around him.
Yes, he is excellent in the role as Han. I mean, he's the standout of this movie. If you ask me, he is the standout. I mean, he's the best character and has the best part in this movie, no doubt.
Yeah, because one of the things we talked about with the other characters in the other films is that they have, Vin Diesel has a charm or a charisma. You immediately believe this character. Paul Walker, even though, again, we felt like in the first one he struggled a little bit, in the second one he kind of really established himself. And again, had that charisma, that kind of movie star appeal.
Yeah.
This guy immediately has that. It's no wonder that when they bring back characters for these movies, they go into the future and let's bring people back. They're bringing back him. And they're not focusing. The focus isn't on Lucas Black or Bow Wow or anybody else to bring back.
Yes.
They find a way to bring back Han because he is clearly, without a doubt, the best part and the ultimate highlight of this film.
He is so good. I mean, his performance is off the charts. Great hair. I just want to put out great hair. Really good hair. I enjoyed it. You're right. Everything you said. He's charismatic. All of these characters almost feel cookie cutter and almost soulless. He brings a real soul to Han.
And I think what that helps about is the actor Sung Kang played a character named Han in Better Luck Tomorrow, which is
Yes.
Justin Lin's previous film, which
Yes.
ended up eventually basically getting him this job
Yep.
as director of this film. And he kind of mentions that, like, okay, he wanted to bring back, Sung Kong. He enjoyed working with him. He wanted to put him in this movie.
Yep.
And I listened to a little bit of the DVD commentary, and he kind of mentioned they didn't have a name for his character. He was just kind of him.
Yeah.
And he was like, well, wouldn't it be funny if I just made him Han? And it fits. It really fits. And maybe part of this love is that we both did watch Better Luck Tomorrow
Yes, we
before
did.
we watched Tokyo Drift to kind of be familiar with this character.
And to
this.
get the origins.
Yeah, to get his quote-unquote origins. Again,
Yeah.
it's not recognized as part... you're not going to find it in a box set for the Fast and Furious series.
No.
But
although it should be.
It should be, and it really fits. And Justin Lin does a great job of kind of... The character absolutely feels like it does belong here. And again,
Yes.
that's something that we'll talk about maybe more at the end. And we're going to actually talk about Better Luck Tomorrow a little bit more.
Yeah, yeah.
But just... Oh, and even in that film, though, along with some really fantastic actors, Sung Kong, the second you see him... I mean, I texted you, like, how cool is this guy?
He's so cool. He's so cool. I mean, he is the best part of the movie.
And he does a great job of balancing the line from, like, he does, like, kind of shady things or, like, criminal things, but he's not a bad guy.
He's not straight up bad.
No, he's not murdering people. He's not shooting people. And again, we'll talk about it more later, but in Better Luck Tomorrow, when things go wrong and whatever, he's not directly involved in that. If you notice, he's the only one of those four characters that's not directly involved in that issue.
Yes.
So, and again, here, like, he's kind of, he's doing some shadier stuff, but he's kind. He's seeking out this outsider that people are kind of shunning, and he's kind of embracing him and bringing him into the culture and welcoming into the country.
Absolutely.
And yeah, I mean,
He's great.
we could sit here for an hour and talk about how great this guy is.
We could. I want to jump to some other characters.
Absolutely.
Let's move to the star. Lucas Black, who plays Sean Boswell in this movie.
He's not doing a bad job, but it doesn't fit.
He's not.
it just feels like, again, I jokingly called him not Paul Walker or whatever.
Yeah.
It feels like he sat in his trailer every day before he filmed this movie, and he watched Fast and Furious on loop and went, I'm going to do that. I'm going to do that.
right
I'm
there.
going to do that. Like,
I'm just going to throw I'm going to use Southern accent.
he
I'm going to
just
do it.
has the Southern accent, but he kind of looks like Paul Walker a little bit.
A little bit.
He feels like he's trying to be Paul Walker. He
Yeah.
feels like he's kind of like trying to. It kind of feels like they wrote this movie and he went like, and actually, to be honest, part of my interesting facts I found is that they never even contacted Paul Walker by coming to this movie because they deemed him to be too old. So
Wow.
it seems like they went, well, he's too old, so let's just get a younger Paul Walker. Let's get the next Paul Walker.
Right.
And this is no offense to this guy. I'm not trying to put him down. He's fine in this role, but this movie would have been better with a stronger lead.
Look, Lucas Black he does what he needs to. I think that's what I'll say. He does what he needs to do, but it's not at any level where it's impressive or it feels like this guy's going to get another movie out of this. Like, I walked away from the movie and I went, he's not great, but it's definitely not the worst performance I've ever seen.
No, we're also not having even mentioned the fact that he's a high school student. He's got a 5 o'clock shadow.
He's got a 5 o'clock shadow. So I looked up his age. He was 24.
24. I mean, that was such a common thing back in the early 2000s, 90s for a long time.
One of my favorite things of that is literally Tobey Maguire
was like almost
Spider-Man
30 years old.
Almost 30, and he's got the tray at the high school. Oh, it makes me laugh every time. He's just walking around with the tray, and you're like, he doesn't fit.
But that's not his fault, right? Yeah. But we see now, like, they go for more age appropriate or fitting actors. Like Tom Holland was, I think, when he got the role of Spider-Man, I think he was 19, 20, playing like a 15, 16-year-old. So, because I get it. There's age restrictions.
Mm-hmm.
If you're going with somebody younger than 18, because I think he's playing 17 in this movie. If you're going for somebody younger than 18, there's child labor laws, and there's issues, and it's harder to film a movie with that. So I understand not wanting to limit yourself with that and going with that, whatever. But you could pick somebody who doesn't look like he's a cop. Like he's an undercover cop.
They literally could have picked somebody who was 19, 20, who looked like a high school student, and it would have gone better.
If they had revealed that Sean Boswell was actually like an undercover cop in this high school the entire time, I would have believed it.
I would have believed it. I'd been like, yeah, I absolutely buy it. Yeah, he's okay. Let me move to the other character that I really liked in this movie. Goes by the name Bow Wow.
I was really surprised by Bow Wow's Twinkie. It's great. I mean, he's
Loved
a
him.
lot of fun.
He
He
is.
has a presence. He understands the type of movie he's trying to make.
He knew. Well, what's that thing? Everybody. He knew the assignment.
Yeah, absolutely.
He knew the assignment.
He
He
went
was
into
really good.
this, and it is funny that Fast and Furious, obviously at this point, now the third movie, has a track record, an official track record, I would say, of hiring rappers. Right?
Yes.
We had Ja Rule in the first one, Ludacris in the second one, and now we have Bow Wow.
Yep.
Okay. And you can say what you want. I know his career didn't exactly go in the direction he wanted,
Sure.
or whatever. But in this role, in this film,
He's great.
he's pretty great.
Yeah.
He doesn't have to do much, and I
Yeah.
think that works. He shows up, he sells some shoes, he cracks some jokes. He's got a weird, Incredible Hulk car, and he's fun. You know.
I mean, when they bring him in, that introduction is so great. When he comes in, and then Sean asks him what kind of car he drives. Do you know any cars around here? And they go to the garage. They're bringing down 2 really nice cars come by, and then that green just like
Minivan or whatever it is.
It looks hideous, and they keep cutting to Bow Wow, and he's doing all this stuff with his face, like he's like blown away. But he's so like turned on by his car, and he's like, "This is so great." And you're like, "It's an ugly car, but he really loves it, and he sells that really well."
Yeah.
And I when that scene really first scene. He had me, and I like Bow Wow. I was like, this is hilarious.
Well, and there's
I
the
really like
immediate,
him.
the immediate, you like Michael Jordan? I like Michael Jordan.
Yes.
Reference to the fact that, hey, he was in a movie called Like Mike
Yes.
just a couple years ago. Yeah, he's a great, little sidekick and stuff.
And
so.
he doesn't have, like you said, he doesn't have a lot to do, but when he does pop in, he's great.
Yeah, well, I think it works because, Sean has kind of two, like, not sidekicks, but like friends, right? And he has Bow Wow, who's the more eccentric, kind of in your face personality, and you have Han, who again is a standout as just this cool guy who has this presence, like the guy like you don't want to mess with. Like nobody's gonna mess with him because Han's behind him.
Yes,
you know what I mean.
Yep.
And I think that really works. Whereas like they didn't try to have, and again I liked this aspect of the second one, but like both Ludacris and Tyrese are kind of very large personalities. In the second one, so you have Paul Walker who's playing it more straight, and you get Tyrese and Ludacris who are both kind of
big.
Yeah. Although Tyrese is playing it a little bit more serious than he does later.
I agree with that. So I also want to shift to the villain, DK, Drift King. I liked him. I really liked him. So I thought this was better than Too Fast, Too Furious villain. I didn't like that guy. This guy was really good.
There's no rat. There's no rat.
There's no rat. No, DK was really good. Like I think the whole introduction of him when he shows up at the garage and he like gets in Sean's face and he's looking at him and he's really intimidating. And then he gets in the car and he just drifts like nobody's business. Like he knows exactly what he's doing, and you're like, this guy is really like. You can see why he has such a grip on the underworld racing scene, because they also say he's got, well, it's shown he has an attachment to the Yakuza.
Yeah.
So that makes it really interesting as well. But I liked the villain. I thought he was better than the other guy. He had more emotion too. He had that scene where he cries. I mean, it was really good.
The actor and the character of DK or whatever is interesting. Okay. My biggest problem with it is the Yakuza's in this movie.
Why not?
I just felt like they're like, hey, we're going to go to Japan. We need some Japanese trademarks or like things that people know Japan for.
Sure.
Hey, the Yakuza, let's make this. It just felt like if in the Fast and the Furious one, if like Dom Toretto in the middle of it's just like, oh yeah, by the way, my uncle's Tony Soprano. Like that would just feel very weird.
Look, I'm gonna take the Yakuza over the 50s Italian mafia guys in the last movie. Like I will take the Yakuza. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
This is way better, and I didn't mind the Yakuza presence. I thought it was like it's a little bit forced for sure. It doesn't, it's one of those things where it does feel forced, and they just put it in the movie because they were like, oh, Japan Yakuza, haha, and they just put it together. But it's not an overbearing presence to the point where you're like, oh, this is all about the Yakuza. Like they kind of come in later, and it's not all about them. They just kind of mention he has ties to the Yakuza, and then that really comes into play towards the end. But I wouldn't say this was a Yakuza movie,
No, it's just, I guess I would have liked the ending, like the ending race, again, not to jump ahead, but the ending race I thought would have had more weight to it if it didn't have the Yakuza there.
You're probably right.
And it was just kind of these guys who have to settle this score without any life-threatening elements or anything like that. That just seemed a little over the top. And the uncle or whatever, he's fine, but it didn't feel. It felt like it was two different movies. And to me, every time they kind of felt like in the scene, and again, it's not a bad scene, but the scene where the uncle goes to DK and he confronts him about Han stealing the money from him and stuff like that, I was bored. Like I wanted to get back to to the main characters. I wanted to get back to more Han and everything like that. So.
And we can talk about it in a little bit, but I think part of the reason maybe that was there was just as...
Well, they wanted motivation for the villain.
It's motivation.
Okay, they needed to explain why this... And they do a good job of kind of explaining, or they do a decent job of kind of explaining why this guy is a jerk, right?
Right.
A good villain, a good movie villain has to have a motivation, right? You don't want him to be evil for the sake of being evil.
Right.
Okay, this guy has a motivation. He's not evil. Like, he's a jerk, right?
Right.
You understand why Neela has an attachment to him, right? They explain that.
Right.
They explain that her mother passed away, that she was raised by his family. You understand why she feels like she cannot escape that lifestyle and escape him.
Yes.
And you also explain why he is so possessive, why he is so kind of angry. You know, he has this weight on him to not embarrass his uncle, to represent his uncle and the Yakuza, and really kind of life-threatening pressure put on him. And I understand that. And he is, supposed to be a teenager, right? Is he still in school?
Maybe. I don't know.
And... he's got this kind of the pressure of the world put on him by his Yakuza, Japanese mafia uncle.
Yeah.
I don't know, man.
Yeah, it's a strange character. I like the villain, but I understand it's not for everybody. The last character we should talk about, really, that deserves time here is the love interest, played by
Natalie Kelly.
Natalie Kelly.
So, plays Neela.
Not great.
It's super generic. Not super generic love interest.
Again, not in the sense of her performance. I think her performance, she does what she can with what she's got. But it starts with the writing. It's a very generic love interest, and she doesn't have a lot to do. It's very clear that she's just there for,
they needed a woman.
They needed a woman, and it was like, we need somebody to be the love interest for Sean. And here she is. It's Neela, and here she is.
Again, doesn't have the presence or the performance of Jordana Brewster, and doesn't even have the presence or performance of an Eva Mendes.
Or a Michelle Rodriguez.
Oh well, absolutely.
Like,
well, that's if we're talking like. That's the standout female performance right there. You know what I mean?
Well, and that's what's interesting is, I think we talked even last week about Eva Mendes. Even though her role wasn't, she didn't have a lot to do at some points. She did a lot with what she had. This one, it was the same vibe of she didn't have a lot to do, but I don't think she was working on the level that Eva Mendes was.
No,
or
and
that
I think
Jordana Brewster does.
I think that's because she's a younger actress.
Right.
She doesn't have I've not looked into her. She probably doesn't have the experience.
Right.
She's fine. She's perfectly fine for this movie. It's just, I don't want to get into it already, but like the part of the problem with this movie is that there are certain elements of it that feel like it is like the straight to DVD version of what we've seen in the previous two movies, with a very few exceptions. Mm-hmm. We talked about Han, and more exceptions we're going to talk about later.
Sure.
But there's one more person I want to talk about.
Sure.
And that's the kid from Home Improvement.
Kid from Home Improvement.
Is the bully in the beginning of the movie.
Oh my God, you're right. Wow. Yeah, you're absolutely right. That was interesting. That was the kid from Home. I thought he looked familiar. I'm like looking at him and I'm like, I know that kid's face. And then you said Home Improvement. I went, he's the oldest son from Home Improvement. Okay.
There's nothing against him. He again, first off, way too old to be in high school.
Way too old. Clearly. To be in high school. even like with the jock jacket on, it just doesn't work.
And he's fine.
He's the generic bully.
He even we talk about villains. We talk about DK. Compared to this guy, he's leaps and bounds above.
Yes.
What this could be. But it's an interesting cast. It's well done. Mm-hmm. But I feel like it kind of says something when Vin Diesel, who's in a movie for 2 minutes, is one of the standout characters of this movie.
Even in the small cameo, I was just happy to see him back. Truly, like, he's really, even in this movie, just in this small 2-minute scene as Dom Toretto, he's really good. Like, he sits there, he delivers his lines really well. Like, I mean, the backstory of his cameo, we might as well just say, the backstory of his cameo was...
So basically, they made this movie. They screened it for test audiences. It didn't do well.
Right.
People didn't love this movie, and they needed to kind of connect it. So they kind of reached out.
Maybe it's because the third movie has another new cast.
So they reached out to Vin Diesel about if he would come back as Dom, and instead of getting any type of compensation, he chose to do it for like the Riddick franchise and the character of Riddick. So the intellectual properties of those, so that he could make a Riddick movie elsewhere.
Yes.
He could take it and go to another studio or on his own or do whatever he wants, and he would eventually go and do that. In 2013, he made Riddick. So which is the third, which is the Chronicles of Riddick came out in 2004.
So he did do it before.
Yeah.
Okay, that's a way earlier movie than I imagined. That.
Yeah, well,
I thought, and for whatever reason, I thought Chronicles of Riddick was like 2008 or something.
No,
I'm really surprised.
That's what's funny, because Pitch Black came out before the first Fast and Furious movie. And then Chronicles of Riddick came out in 2004.
Those are way
And then
earlier.
we get another Riddick movie. We don't get another Riddick movie till 2013. So he had those rights and kind of sat on them for a little bit. Right. And then eventually we see something all the way in 2013. So years later. I'm glad they went to him. I'm glad he did it for what he did it. And obviously they do tie the character of Han with Dom Toretto, which allows them to do more in future movies.
Yes.
Which makes it a little bit more interesting.
It almost was the best thing to happen in the movie, because you bring him in and now you've tied this movie into the franchise, but also you've tied him to the most important character in the franchise of Dom Toretto. Yeah. So it's it was a good move on their part, and it gave us more Han.
Could you imagine if this movie ended and like they finished the race? Oh, you can stay in Japan and the movie ends, and that's it. That's such a week.
What a week. Yeah, it was. Yeah, you get to stay here now.
But the second that Bow Wow comes to Sean, Twinkie comes to Sean, and he goes, "Hey, somebody's here who wants to race you."
Yeah.
And he goes, "Oh, I'm not racing tonight." And we know who it is, okay? We knew this, right? But then you hear that line. He goes, "He said he knew Han. He said he was family."
One of the really unfortunate things in our life is that we're never going to be able to experience that excitement that I'm sure people felt in the theaters when Bow Wow delivered that famous line of "he said he was family." Everybody probably jumped away. Ah!
You know what though? I think that was even before. Like, I think he had said family a few times in the first one, but it was before he really hammers it home, like 5, 6, 7.
There's something else I just wanted to mention about that scene. Where did Sean Boswell hear the phrase, "This isn't going to be a 10-second race"? How did he know to say that? Like, I was looking at him and I was like, wait, he doesn't know anything about Dom Toretto. This was like the 10-second thing was major in the first two movies. And then he says the line, I'm like, how does he know anything about this guy?
It was just a reference.
Yeah, I just thought it was weird that he said that line, because I was like, he knows none of the history between him and Paul Walker, but he didn't even know who it was. And then he pulls up and he's just like, "This is in the 10-second race." And I'm like, what? I'm like, how do you even know to say that? But it was really funny. But it's it's a very good cameo. I'm glad he was in it. The only other thing I thought was, I didn't know that was the very end of the movie. I thought that was a post-credit scene. I thought it was. I was like, when it went into that scene, I went, oh, this is the end of the movie. I was like, for whatever reason, I thought it was a post-credits.
I know 5 with like one exception, has post-credits.
Right.
And I really don't know anything about 4. Mm-hmm. I just found out this week that Han's in 4. I never knew that.
Yeah.
I thought they brought him back for 5.
Right.
So I don't know if there's a post-credit scene in 4, but yeah, I do like that they kind of use these post-credit scenes and kind of use them to establish, because like you mentioned, there's even one in the very first one that I had missed.
Yeah.
It's an interesting way to tie up the movie with that included. Mm-hmm. And audience's enthusiasm for a movie, I feel like, comes from the ending. Like, if the ending doesn't, it can be the greatest movie in the world, but if the ending doesn't deliver, you're left kind of disappointed or with a bad taste in your mouth. And even with a movie that's subpar or decent, you can leave with a really strong ending scene and be like, that was really great. Right. And you walk out of here seeing, this character and, this character and Sean Boswell meeting this character that we know from the first movie that we kind of love. Yeah. And being excited to say, oh my God, Dom's back! Dom's back!
Yes.
Like you mentioned, that excitement. I could only imagine if people had no idea and they're watching this going, oh my God, it's Dom!
Yes. For people who are fans of that, that first and second movie at that time, it was probably a big deal. But yeah, that's how I feel about the cast.
Yeah, I mean, we can move on. This movie had a budget of $85 million. I think that helps that they didn't have to pay Vin Diesel. I think that definitely
yeah, that
helps.
probably helped. They probably didn't have to take any of that 85 mil and put 10 mil to Vin Diesel to show up.
It had a box office of $158.9 million. So it made money. It is, I believe, the lowest grossing of the entire franchise.
Say, that sounds a little weaker than the last two.
But it is completely different. You know,
right.
In this point, it's been 3 years since we've had a Fast and Furious movie.
Right.
You're taking essentially just the title and no additional characters that we've seen before.
Yeah.
So the audience is seeing essentially, you know, fresh faces in this franchise, and really, again, relatively kind of unknown actors. You have Bow Wow,
kind of just starting acting.
Yeah,
really. I mean,
but
he's kind of
people know him, you know, and I'm sure that the other people have, you know, backgrounds and they have careers, kind of like Paul Walker had some success before the first Fast and Furious movie, but he wasn't a movie star.
Right.
He wasn't leading franchises and movies.
Right.
So it made that basically on the title alone. And I think when people realize, hey, it's not really doesn't
Fast
have
and
anything
Furious,
to do with any of the other ones, then, you know, I think
maybe turn them off a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Has a Rotten Tomatoes score. It has a 38% Rotten Critics score, so it's rotten.
Yeah.
But it does have a 69% fresh audience score.
So audiences do like it. I mean, there is an audience for this movie, and I can see why. I can totally see why.
So we can talk a little bit about the story. I'll give you a quick synopsis. Sean Boswell is a high school student with a bad attitude and a love for cars. After finding himself in trouble multiple times for racing, Sean is sent to Tokyo to live with his father. In Tokyo, Sean meets Twinkie and Han, who introduce him to the Japanese racing world and the technique of drifting. Sean quickly finds himself an enemy of Takashi, the self-proclaimed Drift King, and by association, a possible target for the Yakuza. Sean must work with Han and his new friends to learn how to drift and fully understand what it means to be fast and furious.
What a synopsis. My favorite part of that is Sean Boswell is a high school student with a bad attitude. Like it's like the beginning, and a love for cars. It's like every 80s movie ever.
I do want to talk a little bit about that, Sean. I kind of forgot about that aspect of Sean, that he's supposed to. He's kind of like a jerk. Like
he kind of is a jerk.
He's a jerk to everybody.
He's a jerk.
Like, he hates the world.
Yeah.
He doesn't talk to anybody. You know. And
I mean, I understand the whole loner thing, I guess, because he's trying to play like the angsty teenager, but at the same time, there's a difference between angst and just being a jerk.
Yeah, I think
he was
being
a jerk sometimes. Yeah, he was just being a real jerk.
You had him have your single mother move 3 times.
Yeah,
because you can't stop.
Attitude.
You can't stop racing cars. And before we move on, we have to talk about the thing that did not age well. Oh. How about you guys race for me?
Oh my God, yeah, I wanted to mention this. I'm going to be honest with you. I almost turned the movie off when that happened. Because I just went, whoa. I was like, that's not okay. Like, immediately I went, that is really uncomfortable. Because it's not a good line. And
it didn't age well.
It's very 2006. Like, that kind of stuff was still being accepted in movies. And, you know, why don't if you guys race and you get me, and it's just it feels really gross when you hear it now, and you're just kind of like, oh no, I don't like that. Yeah, and not a good line. Didn't like that.
And we also have Sean's dad as well.
Yeah, I mean, what do you say about a guy? I mean, he seems very
he doesn't do much until he pulls that gun.
He doesn't do a lot until he pulls that gun. Before that, he's kind of just trying to be a dad. Not a great dad, but he's trying to be a dad. I mean, and then he pulls the gun on, if we're to believe a high school student, I believe he pulls a gun on a high school student. Yakuza ties or not, still a minor. He pulls a gun on him, you know, makes him leave, but you're just, you know, it's very intense. And then he's the one who gives him the car to race. That's the other big thing he does.
And then that's it. And I don't think we see him again,
You never see him again. No. He's interesting.
What did you think of this story? Is this story good? Is it entertaining? You know?
It's really good. This is going to sound so terrible. It's really good once Han shows up. That's when it gets good.
But even then,
I thought so. Okay.
I don't think the story is good. I think the movie gets better. But I think we're talking stories. I think it's a stinker. It's the story wise.
Yes.
It's the worst in the Fast and Furious franchise so far.
I agree with you. I do think it is the worst story. It's probably the least interesting story.
Yeah.
There's not a lot of stakes here. Like, it's just this kid trying to... It's literally Sean Boswell trying to become the underground drift king. That's really what the movie is. There's, like you said at the beginning, there's no heist. There's no lives at stake. It's just he just wants to become respected, I guess, in this world. And even what they're racing for in the end, it's not even like important. Like, isn't it just honor?
Well, it's so the race is for whoever loses has to leave Japan.
Yeah.
So I feel like that was thrown in. Like, they're like, oh well, we're gonna have these guys race. Well, what are they racing for? Well, nothing. So okay, so let's put some stakes on it. Yeah. And they were like the kind of the lamest stakes you could have. Like, I guess they're pretty big. This kid is essentially getting kicked out of his family, but we never see the consequences of that.
But, like, how do we also know that he left? If he's got Yakuza ties, maybe they just send him to another section where these guys, they send him somewhere else. Where, you know what I mean? Like, it seemed like, what are these guys are they patrolling every day and being like, we're looking for him, you better not be here? You know, it just doesn't make sense. But, you know, I don't know. It's not the best story. No. Compared to the other two, it's not up to par.
No. That will take us into our opinions. So we said not the best cast.
Yes.
It's outside not a great story. Yeah, outside of Han. This is just a Han podcast now. But outside of Han, it's not a great cast, not a great story. Does that bring down your opinions of this movie, or what do you think of this?
It does bring down my opinion a little bit, because if the story was better, it would have been higher rated for me. I will say, you know, I think on the power of Sung Kang's performance, but also I like the action sequences and the races.
The direction,
like, it was good.
The direction of Justin Lin really breathes life into this movie.
Yeah.
And without him, this movie would be the worst movie in the franchise. And with Justin Lin's direction and the way he shoots the action sequences and just the way he moves the camera and even certain shots in Japan really stand out and improve what would have been a otherwise disappointing movie.
If this wasn't directed by Justin Lin, there's a very good chance Tokyo Drift may have been the last Fast and Furious movie. I really feel that.
There's a reason why they bring this guy back.
Yes, but because he is behind the camera, he brings an energy to the movie, and you feel it in the camera, you feel it in the races, you feel it in the action scene. Like, it really sucked me in a way I wasn't expecting, and I went, oh, I see why this guy is important to this franchise.
Yep.
He really delivers. It's excellent direction. It's excellently shot. I really, really liked it more than I thought I was going to. You know, regardless of what the crappy story that we just talked about, it's still a great performance by Sung Kang, and it's great action sequences, and that raises it for me. You know, I enjoyed it more than I enjoyed Too Fast, Too Furious, and that's saying something. Yeah. You know, I did like it more. I liked it more than I'm letting on.
Well, I think that is something that will speak to the rest of the franchise. We may see is that we know this, right? This isn't crazy to say. This isn't Shakespeare, right?
Right.
These aren't the best, and there's no offense to Chris Morgan or anybody else who wrote in these movies. These aren't the most complicated movies. He learns to write these movies in a way that you don't need a grand story or something really. You don't need this incredible story, right? You need sequences. You need moments that stand out. You need to build them in. He finds ways to build them in, and we see them later in the franchise. These movies kind of become like, that's the movie where this happens. That's the movie. That's the movie where they have the safe. Yeah. That's the movie where they're driving at the building. That's the movie with the airplane. Like, you know them for the moments, and he's able to build around those moments instead of trying to force this big story or this focused heavily on dialogue or anything like that. You know, he finds a way to balance it out. Where here, I think, is he's trying to make this. He's trying to get you to care about these characters, but they're not fleshed out enough to do so, which is fine because the direction and the action sequences alone are enough to raise this to a enjoyable movie. Yes. This movie, we kind of talked about this in previous weeks, has kind of gained a cult following as this franchise has gone on. Yeah. Partly because it is the most car-based movie.
Absolutely.
It's the one that focuses on racing, on car techniques and things like that. Yeah. The most. I would say the first one's probably second.
Yes.
But this one really is for those people who love cars and the people who there are people who kind of fell off this franchise because they've moved away from that.
Right.
And I think they've learned to kind of go back to this because it does embrace that car culture.
Absolutely. And that's a big reason why people love it. You're right. I mean, as you said at the beginning as well, we're not car people, but it's really cool seeing them. You know, it's cool seeing them. It's cool seeing people drive them.
The cars look better than I think any of the other cars have looked. The races are better. We talked about in the first and second one. It feels like they're kind of, and not that they didn't, but I'm sure they raced or they used the actual car. I know that they used actual cars and stuff, but it just feels like they're sitting in the car, kind of just shifting and kind of just
gears, turning the wheels.
Yeah,
right,
and there's like a green screen behind them or whatever.
Right.
I mean, we mentioned that you can actually see the green screen in
Yes.
Too Fast, Too Furious. That this one, they feel real, right?
Yes.
These race sequences feel authentic and they feel real. You know, when they're driving through Tokyo, you feel like you're in Tokyo.
Yes.
They show the city and some of the sequences when they have to get through the crowd. It's just a great. There's just some really great sequences, and you know, yes, you're a little bored throughout the story, and the characters don't hold your attention as well. When they get they're behind the wheel of one of these cars, it takes off, and it's a whole nother level.
And I think that really speaks to the movie more, and why I like it more than Too Fast, Too Furious, because I can name more sequences I liked in this movie than I can from Too Fast, Too Furious. Like Too Fast, Too Furious had maybe one that I really enjoyed, one or two, but this movie had multiple that I really enjoyed. And at the end, it is about the sequences in a way. So
absolutely, like you said, I have a more positive view than this movie. It wasn't as much as I was kind of hoping. I was hoping I would like this a little bit more.
Yeah.
Just because I know it has that cult status, and I know people really are kind of diehard about it.
Right.
And I was hoping to kind of be more on that side. But I enjoyed it. At the end of the day, it's a good movie.
Yes.
I had fun with it. I'm really glad that they brought Justin Lin back. And you can tell why they brought him back.
You can tell. And it's fantastic having him back, because he goes on to direct like 3 more after this before he takes a small break.
Yeah, he does 4, 5, and 6.
Before his break, and then he comes back.
And then he comes back for 9, and he's going to do the last 2.
But the next 3 we watch, he's a director. So that's... very exciting.
It makes me watching. I walk out of this one going,
I can't wait
to see the next one, because I want to see what he's going to do with a bigger budget, with those returning actors.
Yes,
you know, I'm really excited.
Yes, very pumped.
We can talk about the uniqueness about this movie. What stands out to you in this movie? I mean, I would say this obviously is the most unique in the franchise,
for sure,
because it is. I mean, they hit a soft reboot, right? They hit the reset button here, and they kind of bring everything back, or they take it back to ground zero, and they try to make something new, right? Dom's not the main character. There's no Paul Walker. There's no Tyrese. There's no Ludacris. There's no Ja Rule. What are you going to do?
What are you going to do?
So obviously it stands out for that reason. You can look back and go, oh, this is the one that didn't have anybody. Yeah. So I think it does stand out for that. But is there anything else in this movie?
It's also the Tokyo setting. It's being set in Japan. I really like the sequences of the city. It's being set in Japan. It's the racing style they're using. These races aren't just outside of the beginning where they have just a straight race. Everything else is drifting. And it's unique in that way, because this entire movie is a different racing style completely. And that really makes it stand out. And it also, like we were just talking about, it changes the action sequences entirely of what they're doing. Yep. So that really made it stand out to me. And
and even that opening race, I think is shot better than a lot of the other races. It's in the daylight.
Yep.
You can see everything.
Yep.
It's brutal when they're crashing their cars, and he crashes the car into the pipe at the end of it. It's brutal.
It is a really good race sequence, I will say. I mean, just being in that construction site and tearing through it, and you're right, crashing and hitting things, and then when he comes out on the other side and he looks like he's gonna win, and then he just starts ramming his car. You're like, what are you doing, dude? Like, that's the worst thing you could be doing right now. And he's, his anger gets the best of him, I suppose, but still wildly dangerous to be doing. And obviously there are consequences as they both crash and ruin their cars. It's really an intense and well shot race for a straight race, and then everything after that is drifting, and that uniqueness really stands out.
If it was all just that type of racing, it might get a little bit boring, but this is a different style we've never seen before. It's very interesting. I mean, absolutely, like you said, the racing sequences, I don't think we even have to mention anymore. Han, obviously, is the
he's-
absolute standout of this
He's
movie.
the best. I mean, we literally could do a whole podcast on Han, but we're not going to. He's great, though.
And I feel like this is cheating, but the ending, like we mentioned, right? The ending is stands out. And like I mentioned, it leaves you walk out of this movie and you have a good taste in your mouth. That was actually fun. Oh,
Yeah.
I can't believe they brought back Dom.
Yeah.
I want to see what they're going to do there and stuff. So,
Right.
And I mean, this is an obvious answer, and we kind of covered it, but what does this bring anything new?
Yeah, this is like the easiest one we get to do
Because the answer
it's
is Justin Lin.
Justin Lin. Everything is new in this movie, so it's so easy to answer it. You can say Justin Lin. You can say the racing. You can say bringing Han in. You know, there's so many things you can say that are new. So it almost feels like a redundant question.
Yeah,
But
I think again we talked about him already, but Justin Lin.
I guess we can say Chris Morgan too. This is the first one he wrote, right?
Yeah. But I think. And again, nothing against him. I think this is probably the weakest one that he wrote.
For sure, he gets better.
Yeah,
but this one is
like even though this isn't the greatest movie of all time, or this isn't the best movie in this franchise. Justin Lin does such a great job.
Yeah.
I think Chris Morgan does okay, but
Right.
I actually can maybe elaborate down on that a little bit more.
Sure.
Here's an interesting question: what is the best scene?
Oh man, yeah. I thought about this, and I think for me it is the race through the city when they're trying to escape, leading to spoilers, I guess, but you should have seen this movie by now. Leading to Han's death. Mm-hmm. That whole sequence is so good when they're racing through the crowd and they drift through the crowd. I mean, really, really awesome sequence. That's probably the standout for me. I personally thought, and then leading to obviously Han's death, it's actually emotional. I was even though I know this guy comes back, I was still upset watching him blow up in the car.
He just gets T-boned by that car.
T-boned.
It's again, I don't mean to keep using this word, but it's brutal.
It is. It's brutal.
You feel those hits.
Yes, it's brutal, and he gets flipped over, and when it pans to him just under the car, kind of like he looks like he's like shaking from you're like, oh my god, and then it blows up, and you're like, geez, that's really rough. But it's yeah.
I watched that scene again. I'm like, they bring this guy back.
Yeah.
How do they bring this guy back?
I can't wait to get to when. I can't wait to get to
9
when they officially reveal how they brought him back. Because I don't know, but I'm excited to see. But for me, it is that sequence escaping the garage and getting. Yeah, it's the best. What about you?
So obviously that's a standout. And I think it is cheating to say the Dominic Toretto scene.
Yeah, it's everybody. It is, yes.
But I have a scene. It's funny because first movie you picked more of a dialogue scene than you did an action sequence.
I picked the more,
I've been picking action sequences.
Sure.
I have a scene that really stood out to me, and I think it kind of shows Justin Lin's maybe like directing style a little bit, or like how he was able to frame Tokyo and show off the city. And it's the rooftop scene. So you have the crews playing soccer, and then you have Han and Sean are having a conversation. And I just loved the conversation between the two of them. And he refers to Tokyo as his Mexico. He was like this guy on the run, and he goes to Tokyo. And again, that is where we see this works kind of on multiple levels, because you can look at it as he is his character from Better Luck Tomorrow, talking about how he left that world behind and came to Tokyo. But as we learned, this is actually set in the future after 4, 5, and 6.
Yes.
And there's a reason why he ends up in Tokyo from those movies. So you can look at it retroactively as him, from at that point talking about it and why he ended up in Tokyo. And I just thought it really worked. And like some of the lines he says, who you choose to have around you lets you know who you are. And I thought that really worked. I felt like that really defined his character.
He's a star, man.
and just the way he first off, they're playing soccer on a soccer field on a rooftop in Japan. And is just the building, how the building was. And it was so cool. And the way they show off the Tokyo skyline, there's shots of the people on the ground. And I really liked that scene.
That's a great choice.
And it really stood out to me.
That's a really good choice.
This is the scene where I listened to the commentary with Justin Lin on the DVD, because I watched this on the DVD.
Right.
And he said, during that scene, he said it was an inside joke. That, this is my Mexico and stuff like that was an inside joke, because he was connecting he's like, this is when we decided this is the same character from Better
Right,
Luck Tomorrow.
right.
And he kind of viewed it as an inside joke, but it's funny that they've kind of gone with that and said, no, he really is, you know.
He really is.
So,
yeah, this is the same character. Yeah, really good. I also want to say a standout for me as well. Just it wasn't my favorite, but I really liked it. Was just the training montage of them teaching him to drift. I really enjoyed that.
I love a good training montage.
I love a good training montage. I loved watching them train him to drift. Yeah, it was good.
Yeah, I mean, we'll talk about training montages more when we eventually do Rocky.
Oh.
So,
coming soon. Rocky. Yeah, it's going to be fun.
And then we have connectivity. How does this fit in with the franchise?
I mean, we go back to what we've been saying the whole time. It is the most different of all of them. I mean, it doesn't really... like, you know, the only connection is when they bring Dom in.
Yeah. I said, this is them hitting the reset button. This is a soft reboot
button. Yeah. And it doesn't really connect to the other movies in any way until Dom is brought in. It is its own movie the entire time. Until that scene at the end, it is its own story. It's its own movie. None of what happened in the other two movies matters at all in this one.
And you could say that they didn't even happen. You know what I mean?
You can even say that. Yeah, you could say that it didn't even happen. And it really... It literally is the most unique movie. I think it will be important later when we watch the other movies. Well, but as of right now,
I feel like every week we've mentioned that's the power of this franchise, that they have done a really good job. I feel like, and maybe we'll, when we actually see those movies again, we will disagree. But I feel like they've done a really good job of digging back into the lore, and finding out how can we connect this. Right, this was clearly and like I mentioned, they only included that Dominic Toretto scene because it didn't do well with test audiences. Right. So if they don't include that scene, you could pretend this movie never happened. Right, but because he's in that scene, they have to do something with that. They have to do something with him, and they kind of have to address. And then obviously they decided, you know, I want to bring back Han, so we need to find ways to do that. Because I feel like 4, and we'll talk about this more next week, is kind of a soft reboot as well, because they're like, hey, we're going to act like 3 didn't even happen.
Right.
And then at a later date, they're like, well, actually, let's double back into 3.
Let's bring it back.
You know?
Right? And it becomes more important to the franchise later on. And that's what's going to make... I think this movie's going to be more exciting later on. But as of right now, for where we're at with being the 3rd film in... there's no connective tissue here.
Yeah.
It's very, you know, outside of the Dom scene, no connective tissue whatsoever.
Do you think that this deserves to be a Fast and Furious movie? Do you think it fits in well enough and that it deserves to...
I do. I really do. I think once you take into account the great action sequences that really what this franchise becomes, what defines this franchise later on are the action sequences. This is the start of it. This is kind of, and I know we talked last week about how, you know, John Singleton with Too Fast, Too Furious kind of started to incorporate some of those crazier action stunts.
But I think he did the goofy.
He did the goofy,
and this is the action. And then they
action.
start to meld them together in later movies.
And you can definitely feel, you know, the Justin Lin direction. And I would want to see another one of these after I watch this. I think it is a continuation, a great continuation after 2. I think it brings enough energy. It's got a great stand-up performance, as we keep talking about, but also the sequences, the action sequences alone. If you're going to watch this movie, watch for the action sequences alone, because they're great.
I think it is a worthy continuation, but it is very interesting because it's a new interesting take on it. But it does suffer from, like we mentioned, poor writing.
Yes.
And we do have to kind of mention this. I mean, I blew your mind in the first episode of this. I feel like it's afraid to take risks with its casting.
Yes.
You know, it's a movie called Tokyo Drift, and the main character is a white guy.
Yeah, it's a southern white guy.
Yeah, and obviously they make a backstory
who's got a bad attitude.
They make a backstory to explain why this white guy is in Japan, which is fine. But why couldn't you just... why couldn't Han be the main character of this movie, and you tell us from his perspective, and it's an Asian or a Japanese or an Asian or whatever. You know, it doesn't have to be Han. It could be a Japanese character. It can be an Asian character. It could be whatever. It doesn't. It could be, but you could take a risk.
Yes.
Right. And you this is your opportunity to do something new, and they just hired discount Paul Walker.
Yes.
Like,
I mean, this could have been a really great all Asian cast, Fast and Furious, led by Sung Kang. as Han. I mean, the movie would be completely different, and I think if that were the case, we'd be having a different conversation right now about how we liked this movie. Because Han was awesome.
Look at something like Better Luck Tomorrow that Justin Lin directed that has an all-Asian cast with very few exceptions.
Yes.
There's an interesting exception in that movie.
Yeah.
But very few exceptions. It's all-Asian cast.
Yep.
And such a gripping story.
Excellent movie.
And they play with tropes about, and again, we'll talk about this later, but they play with tropes on, kind of the Asian American stereotypes and stuff. That story in general could be told with a white cast.
Yes.
But he chose to use an Asian American cast and to kind of play up how it contradicts to the normal stereotypes of what you expect from an Asian American,
right?
Especially teenager or high school student. You know what I mean? So if he could do something like that with the Fast and Furious franchise, I'd be more interested versus we're just getting the perspective of this American, whether he's white or whatever, just this American main character, where I would like to see, he could be Japanese, he could be European or something. Give me something a little bit different.
Well, that's the thing, too. I mean, we have to remember this is also 2006, where that type of casting, for a franchise this big, the studio would not be like, it's okay that
they were afraid
an all-Asian cast. I guarantee you that studio said it needs to be a white guy in the lead. No doubt.
We're only now living in a world that is opening up those doors.
Yes.
Of, we can cast a white actor or a black actor or an Asian actor or a European actor.
Or we can have movies that are all black cast or all Asian cast and only have background white characters.
Movie producers and studios are accepting that audiences want to see
diversity.
Yeah. And not just, I gotta have another white guy in the movie.
Yeah, who's the next famous white guy? Yeah. We don't need that anymore. We want to see the diversity. So I think you're right. You're absolutely right.
Absolutely. Before we touch on the future of the franchise, let's get into some interesting facts and a little bit of casting. There's not a lot. As we go forward in this franchise, we're going to see less and less of the casting alternatives.
I was thinking
because the cast is becoming established.
Right. Because I was going to say the early movies, it's like, of course that's really interesting, the first and second movie, but I imagine in the next few watches we're probably not going to see that.
There's
as
a
much.
couple. There's they had somebody, and we'll talk about this when we get there. When they bring in The Rock, there was somebody else they were going to bring in, not The Rock.
Yeah.
Right?
When it's new characters, I imagine. But as far as like main cast, it's set.
And with some of these in the previous episodes, like I mentioned names, people who auditioned. People audition all the time, right?
Yeah.
There's famous. You can find them on YouTube. Audition tapes for The Office that has Seth Rogen and all Adam Scott and all these other Bob Odenkirk and all these other. Now we know relatively famous actors auditioning for these roles. So I know to audition for something isn't a big deal, but I do think it's interesting to see what if they did get cast in this movie.
Right.
So the biggest one that I really could find for this one, really the only one I could find for this one, is that in an interview on a talk show, I believe it was Jimmy Kimmel maybe, Channing Tatum revealed that he did audition for this movie.
Yeah.
And what would have been... he didn't say, but what we can presume as the Sean Boswell role.
Yeah, I that's not surprising to me. 2006, or I guess 5 when they would be casting, that makes sense because Channing Tatum was kind of starting to come up.
He was trying to get up. Yeah.
And I could totally see him in... Honestly, I could see him doing this movie. Like, I could totally swap those two out and see him.
I think this movie is better with him. Significantly better.
I do agree.
and then that's when they would go, we're bringing Channing... They would bring Channing Tatum back way before they do the Lucas Black. You know what I mean? They would be like, Channing Tatum, we're getting him
especially
back.
With where his career is gone, you would want him back. So
apparently he bombed the audition so bad that he just walked out. And
at least he knew.
he admitted that the main reason why he auditioned for the role is because he just wanted to go to Tokyo.
Good for him. Good for him. Look, there's nothing wrong with a guy wanting to travel. Good for him.
As we mentioned, but we'll formally get into it, Justin Lin's 2002 film Better Luck Tomorrow features Sung Kang as the character of Han Lu, and while never officially being recognized as part of the series, the film is often looked at as the canon backstory for Han. So,
look, as you mentioned earlier this week, we did watch this film as a companion piece to Tokyo Drift, and we watched it first before we watched Tokyo Drift because we wanted the origin story. All I'll say is, I think it really works. I think the way they attach them work, and it's good. Yeah.
The ending of Better Luck Tomorrow leaves, and we'll talk about this later, but it leaves kind of an opening for what happens to kind of all of the characters.
Yes.
And it's believable that his specifically would end up in this situation.
Right.
This doesn't feel forced. Like, we've talked about like fan theories, and I mentioned like the theory with The Rock,
Yep.
where the film The Rock, not Dwayne The Rock Johnson,
yes.
the film The Rock, where people believe that Sean Connery is playing James Bond in that movie, and they've kind of teased and kind of said, yeah, that's basically what they wanted, but obviously they didn't own that character.
They couldn't say.
I'm guessing Justin Lin has the rights to this character, and he's just like, F it, we're going to do it.
Right.
And I think that's brilliant. He's like, that character fits, and he really does. The way he acts, the way he talks, even the car that he drives in Better Luck Tomorrow fits into this world.
Yeah.
And then you mentioned this earlier, but Vin Diesel agreed to cameo in the film in exchange of Universal's ownership rights of the Chronicles of Riddick franchise and the Riddick character instead of being paid. Diesel will go on to star in Riddick in 2013. We kind of already
touched on it, but I think it's again, it's really interesting that he said, "I don't want money. I care about this other character a lot too, and I want the rights to that character."
Interesting.
Again, it says a lot about him.
It's interesting to view how he feels like for this franchise at the time versus like he's more interested in he really clearly must love this character of Riddick in these movies. Yeah. And I think that they were successul, but I don't think that they
didn't blow up.
No, they had an audience, and again, we'll talk about we will do a Riddick episode eventually.
We're gonna we have to. It's the Riddick trilogy.
But he clearly has the love for that, and I think it's funny that he kind of is known for the Fast and the Furious, but it seems like his passion, at least at the time, I think his relationship with Paul Walker has brought a love for the Fast and Furious franchise out of him.
Yes.
Especially now that Paul Walker's no longer with us.
Yes.
But it is funny to see at the time that he kind of could not care less about this franchise.
No, he didn't. He did not care, but what's interesting is even for not caring, he still delivers in that scene. He really does. He delivers in that scene. But yeah, it really shows you that his interests were lying elsewhere. Even when they asked him to come back and do this, he clearly was more interested in making a Riddick movie, because he wouldn't have asked if he wasn't interested in doing that. And he had interest elsewhere at the time. And it's funny that within 3 years, he's back to Fast and Furious 4. Yep. Because that's 2009. So within 3 years, he's back again.
I wonder if maybe there was a bond with Justin Lin. Maybe he felt a connection with him. Or he liked the direction he took.
Maybe the idea he heard, he went, "Oh, that's really good."
Yeah. Well, I think that's probably it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, we'll find, like you said, we'll talk about that more next week. And then I mentioned this earlier, but I'll say it again. Paul Walker was not asked to return to the to this due to the studio feeling that he was too old, which is crazy to think.
It's crazy to think, but
their demographic was like teenage boys. Like I feel like it was like 13 to 17-year-old, I feel like, and maybe they were afraid that
maybe some early 20s as well.
Yeah, I guess, but maybe they were afraid that Paul Walker had kind of aged out of the role. He's a little bit too older, and also, and we'll get to that in a little bit. They had this in mind that they really just wanted a high school story. They wanted to go into high school, and clearly he's not a high school student.
Sure,
and he's not going to all of a sudden be a teacher.
Right.
So how do you put this? So I guess they figured it's best to not even involve him in the story.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think with Paul Walker, I'll just be real. With Paul Walker, this is a significantly better movie. If just like if it was Channing Tatum in the role, or if Han led, or if Sung Kang led the movie. I keep calling him Han.
No,
I just see him as Han. He's so good. If they led the movie, I think the same can be said that if Paul Walker led this movie, it's the same thing. It would have been significantly better than casting a completely new and fairly unknown actor in this role.
Absolutely. And here's some other fun facts. Writer Chris Morgan became attached as the producers of the film held an open writing call. Morgan's original pitch of the film featured Vin Diesel as Dom Toretto in Tokyo, learning how to drift and having to solve a murder.
Yeah, and we didn't get that movie.
That's a much better idea.
That is a really good idea. It's interesting to think about that.
Well, I have a quote here from Chris Morgan. He did an interview with Collider a couple years ago.
Sure.
And they kind of explains his thinking behind a lot of that stuff. And it's, I became aware of Tokyo Drift because there was a Fast and Furious sequel open writing assignment. So I kind of put together a take, and I came in, and I met with Universal.
Right.
I brought some videos, and I said, hey, they're doing this thing in Japan called drifting, and it's really cool. My idea...
It's really cool.
My idea for a story is Dominic Toretto learned that someone he cares about has been killed in Japan, and he has to go there in order to solve the crime. He has to get in there with these drifters and learn a new style of racing in this whole thing. And they said, yeah, the drifting is cool, but I don't think we're going to get Vin Diesel back on this. This is smaller. The budget was so low, and it was potentially a straight-to-DVD movie. So they were like, listen, I don't think this is going to work out, but thanks anyway. So I left. Didn't get the job, and like a week and a half later, I get a phone call like, hey man, what was that thing called drifting again? What was that? Would you come in and talk to me about that again? And I said, sure. So I came back in and I repitched it, and he said, well, really what we'd like to do is set it in high school. And I was like, you know what? God bless you. I was terrible in high school. I don't think I can write high school. Go ahead and have the idea. You can just take it and we'll work on something else together down the road. I was just trying to kind of foster goodwill. And he was like, no. You know what? You're totally right. You should do the Dominic Toretto version. And I'm like, really? That's awesome. So they hired me to write it. And back then you would do 2 steps. So I got my first step, which was my draft. And then that I did. They read it. I got 1 note back from them. They would give you their notes and then you do a rewrite. And it was great. Now set it in high school. So that's where Tokyo Drift became what it was.
First of all, that's a heck of a quote. I like how you said it's a quote and you just read like a speech he gave.
It's one long thing.
It's one long thing. No, that's really interesting. Wow. It's so funny how people get jobs, isn't it? Like, he just kind of went in there, was like, Vin Diesel, Tokyo, solves murder. This is the movie. And they go, yeah, we can't afford Vin Diesel, so we're not going to do that. And then they kind of just were like, they baited him, basically.
I think, like we talked about...
Yeah, do the Vin Diesel.
The weakness is the script, and I think that explains why the script... So he himself has admitted, I don't want to touch a high school story. Right, I don't want to tell a high school story. Yeah. I'm not into high school writing high school dialogue. Yeah. I don't know the culture. I don't want to do that.
And he didn't like high school.
No, he didn't want to do it, and they kind of forced him to do it. They kind of
forced his hand, and he had to do it. But, I mean, it explains why the script isn't as strong, because even he's admitting, like, I don't write high school well, and if you don't like the story, that's why. It's not his strong suit.
You can tell, like, that's why I think the Yakuza is in here, because that's probably a holdover from the Dom story, right?
Right.
He probably gets involved in the Yakuza, yes. Whoever he loves. I wonder if the pitch for somebody he loves, I wonder if that pitch was for Brian O'Connor.
Ooh.
And I'm glad they didn't go that road if they were going to kill Paul Walker off.
That would have been sad. Oh man, so many different things that could have happened. But yeah, I'm glad he can admit that it wasn't the strongest. But that's very funny.
Yeah, so good on him. And I have some more notes here. Ooh. Justin Lin was approached due to producer Neil Moritz being a fan of his previous film, Better Luck Tomorrow. Mm-hmm. Multiple drifting personalities were brought on as consults, and even some as stunt drivers to help create and perform the various driving stunts in the film, which is why it looks so good, because these guys know what they're doing.
Absolutely.
And I believe that the guy who's like fishing throughout when like he's trying to learn how to drift, I believe that is like the real Drift King. Like, he, like, is, like, really, like, at the time, like, the best drifter.
Oh, that's so cool. I didn't know that. Oh, that's awesome. See, I love facts like that. I didn't know that. I kept wondering why they kept going back to those guys fishing, and it's just the real Drift King. That's so cool. Because that line makes sense of him looking and going, oh, not bad, Or, oh, that you call that drift? That makes so much sense. That's great.
Reportedly... This is fascinating, although I feel like this might happen more. Reportedly, the production couldn't get the necessary filming permits in Tokyo. I believe that, like, in Japan, they don't really... It's not like in America, you go and you say, I want to film here, give me a permit. So they filmed without permission, which means they had a kind of a target on their back.
Yeah.
To prevent any problem, the studio hired a fall guy to pretend that he was the director, and he was arrested, and he spent the night in jail.
Oh my god, that's so funny. That's hilarious.
And apparently Justin Lin didn't even know this. Like, he found out later. They
just hired a fall guy, had no idea. This guy spent a night in jail for this movie. And then later on, they're like, the premiere night, the fall guy comes up to him and goes, I spent a night in jail for this movie. And he's just like, I'm sorry, who are you? I'm the fall guy. I'm the other Justin Lin.
I guess again, and they kind of touch on it, even in this movie, where
Yeah.
if you go faster than this, the police don't even try, right?
Right.
So I believe it is more of a kind of a laxed culture,
Right.
and from what I was reading, they don't they respond, but they take their time. So
Yeah.
when they were coming, they kind of had a heads up that maybe they were coming, and then this guy kind of stepped up. Again, apparently Justin Lin did not know this happened. It's not like he saw it,
Right.
It's not like this guy's like, I'm the director, and he's going, oh, let me,
Right.
Like,
literally, Justin Lin's like filming a scene, and this guy's getting arrested and has no idea.
So, really fascinating. And I saw some conflicting reports on this. At least over 100 cars were destroyed and wrecked during this filming.
Yes.
I've seen over 200 listed in some places.
So this becomes a thing with Justin Lin. Like I have seen like everyone is. It seems like interviews he does when he Fast movie comes out. They always ask him, how many cars did you destroy this time? And it's always like this extraordinarily high number.
And this is something that we will talk about for I think more on 5.
Mm-hmm.
He makes a conscious decision at one point to try to focus this on practical stunts.
Yes.
He had received some criticism from fans of the franchise for like, oh, you're using CGI cars, or
Right.
this doesn't feel real or whatever. So
Right.
I think come 5, almost everything in the movie is really practical and done. I mean, obviously there's safety measures and
Right,
there's things,
right.
but he makes a full effort to eliminate as much. I mean, any movie, more than you think, needs CGI, right?
Right.
Forrest Gump was a leading breakthrough in CGI technology. You don't
Right.
necessarily think of that right away. I mean, obviously with some of the presidential stuff, but any film really uses CGI. Dramas, action movies, even comedies, you'll see. But he makes an effort here to, really try to transition this franchise into a practical, sense. And not to the extent of maybe like a Mission Impossible where, Tom Cruise is really hanging on a plane and really,
Yeah.
I mean,
like he's risking their lives, you know.
yeah. I mean, and a lot of the actors, specifically Paul Walker, ends up doing a lot of his own stunts.
Right.
But I think it's a little bit more of a controlled environment,
Yeah, I don't think it's
not
I don't think it's the intense stuff.
He's
I
not
think it's
breaking his ankle and still
Right.
running like Tom Cruise literally does in a
breaks his
Mission
ankle,
Impossible
yeah.
movie.
Yeah, nobody's doing Halo jumps in these movies, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Those are my fun facts. We
Nice.
can talk a little bit about the future of this franchise. Mm-hmm. I'm going to handle this maybe a little bit differently this time.
Sure.
Should there be or have been a sequel to this movie? And I'm going to start off by saying I think they did this right. I think they handled this right. A continuation of this story, nah, I'm good. I don't need to see Sean anymore.
Sure.
I don't need to see Sean Boswell as a main character anymore.
Right.
I don't need to, maybe we could explore Tokyo a little bit more, but I feel like that's kind of been done. You mentioned these movies are kind of globe-trotting.
Right.
And I enjoy that aspect of kind of seeing different environments. I don't know if I need to necessarily go back there.
Yeah.
But I think that, they do an interesting job of making kind of a reboot / connection to the original two. I think is kind of the way to handle this.
Right.
So
Yeah, I agree with that totally. I would not want to see another film set in Tokyo which starring Lucas Black as Sean Boswell.
Well,
I don't want to see that.
I was reading an article and they linked to another article, and I don't think they realized that the article they linked to was written on April 1st.
A joke article.
But it was saying, oh, they're working on Tokyo Drift 2.
Hilarious. I love April 1st because you get crazy stories like that all day. Like for movie fans, you'll just get things that like people have wanted for a long time, and then they're just like, oh, it's not real.
But the article I was reading, the original article I was reading was not. It was like May or something. It was not April.
right,
It was
right.
not in April.
But they went
were
back
like,
to-
hey, I don't know if you heard that there's a Tokyo Drift 2. I'm like, did you look the date on
Yeah.
that? On that?
April
Like-
1st. Yeah.
So no, I don't need a Tokyo Drift 2 here.
Yeah,
I
no.
don't need to see.
I don't want to see it.
No,
I don't wanna
I don't.
see it.
I don't mind that they brought
Especially if Han is still dead. No, thank you. No,
Absolutely
thank you.
not.
No, thank you.
I think again how they handle it. They bring back Han in this different way, and then
Yeah.
they do end up. Lucas Black comes back actually multiple times, believe it or
Yeah,
not.
yeah.
And Bow Wow comes back.
Yes.
In 9.
Yes.
I think that is cool, and I actually think some of the other like crew members
Earl
too.
comes back,
Earl
too.
comes back. Yeah. So I think that is interesting as well.
Yeah.
That they are bringing back some of these characters in 9. And we'll see maybe where again, we have not seen 9. I feel like we say this every week. We do say this every week. We'll see when we watch that one how they connect and what there is a future for there. Yes. Maybe we walk into 9 going, what Tokyo Drift 2?
Yeah. Tokyo Drift 2 now.
Probably not, though.
Yeah, probably not.
Is there anything different? We know where this franchise goes. Is there anything different you would like to see in the future? After this movie, we know what lies ahead. Would you take this in any different direction, or do you think they kind of made the right move by going back to the Toretto O'Connor story?
They made the right move going back, because I think we just established we don't want to see Tokyo Drift 2. So I think it was the right move to go back to the Dom Toretto and Brian O'Connor story, especially when you end Tokyo Drift with Dom. You have to go back to it. You can't just reference Dom and then say, oh, Han was family, and then not even go back to
and see that. We got to see more of that.
We need to see more of it. So I think they made the right decision. I wouldn't change it. I wouldn't change anything they did.
And then usually the last 2 weeks we've been talking about what kind of franchise star we would bring into here. I don't think I'm going to take a cheat. I don't think you do. I think the big thing you do is you bring back the original cast.
Yes, I agree.
I think that's what you need
know who
to
the franchise star
is. Vin Diesel.
It's Vin Diesel.
It's Vin Diesel.
Yeah, you bring back Vin Diesel because that's what everybody wants. And I agree with you. That's the star you bring back because even... Yeah, no, that's the conversation right there. That's it.
I think that question, I like that question, but it is kind of loaded because I feel like you got to be careful with that because eventually we're going to be saying, every week is going to be like, oh, The Rock, oh, The Rock, oh, The Rock. Or every week you're going to say, so I think like I said, I think the answer is there is no answer. It's you bring back Vin Diesel, you bring back Paul Walker, Michelle Rodriguez, Jordana Brewster, whoever else you need.
You bring the main star.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And to connect those main characters, with some new characters and stuff like that, it's, I think that's probably the right direction.
Yes.
And I don't know. I've heard mixed things about the next film.
Yeah.
I don't know if they necessarily handle it in the best manner, but obviously, eventually, they do kind of hit their stride and figure it out.
My theory is next week is going to be the last week where we have kind of mixed feelings. Because Fast 5 is when this takes off. We know that. Fast 5 is when this takes off. It's funny because
it's kind of like the halfway point.
Yes.
And then the first half is, it's a little bit heavier on the second half, but the first half is like they're not bad. Yeah. But they're not the strongest. I don't see anybody saying that 1, 2, 3, or 4. Actually, 1, 2, or 4 are their favorite. I have seen in recent years, some people say Tokyo Drift is their favorite.
Yeah.
And I think that is what we mentioned. Those are those the car fans.
Yeah.
The gearheads, as they will.
The gearheads, yes.
Who really like to see, the drifting techniques and the cars and kind of that culture and everything like that.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I agree with you.
And we now have 3 movies. Let's rank. I think this is pretty easy. What would you rank first in this franchise?
So, yeah, I think I would still put the first movie at 1, personally.
Yeah.
2, Tokyo Drift. And obviously, 3 is Too Fast, Too Furious.
Yeah, so that's our ranking for right now. Yeah, I absolutely agree with you. I gave this film 3 stars.
I also gave it 3 stars.
Yeah. It's a 3-star movie. It's actually, to me, it's kind of a 2.5-star movie with a much better director and kind of star or supporting character, breakout character.
That's what lifts it.
That lifts it up to the 3 stars for me.
Absolutely.
If without Justin Lin, without Sung Kong, this lowers it.
Yeah.
Unfortunately.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, now that we're done talking about Tokyo Drift, let's talk about Better Luck Tomorrow a little bit. Better Luck Tomorrow, Justin Lin's previous movie, the movie that ended up getting him the role, or the job of director.
Yes.
Release date of April 11th, 2003 was a theatrical release. It was released in Sundance the year prior. It was released in January of 2002, or is where it was originally screened.
Yes.
Obviously directed by Justin Lin, written by Ernesto Ferranda, Justin Lin, and Fabian Marquez. We're not going to get fully into this like we did with Tokyo Drift. We want to touch on this a little bit. If you have not seen Better Luck Tomorrow, for Tony who's listening and anybody else,
stop now.
Stop now if you don't want to know anything about this movie. We both highly recommend this movie.
Seek it out.
Really entertaining, really well done. We are going to spoil a little bit of it.
As of now, with the recording of this podcast, it is on Prime.
Yep.
So, hopefully when this does come out, it will still be on Prime, but please seek it out.
Check it out.
It is an excellent movie.
It's absolutely...
And we're talking about this because the character of Han originated in Better Luck Tomorrow, and that's why we're talking about it.
I'll do a very brief rundown, similar to what we did with Tokyo Drift and our other movies, starring Perry Shen as Ben Manabag, Jason Tobin as Virgil Hugh, Sung Kong as Han Lu, Roger Fan as Derek Liu, John Cho as Steve, Karen Anna Chung as Stephanie Vandergosh, and I wrote this down because it's interesting, Jerry Mathers as the biology teacher. Do you know who Jerry Mathers is?
No.
He is the Beaver from Leave It to Beaver.
Hilarious.
So
hilarious. That's why.
That's when I said there's a white actor in this movie.
Right. Okay. I was wondering why they even have like a credit for the biology teacher originally, because I was like, he's barely. Why did they even credit this guy? And then you're telling me he's in Leave It to Beaver, and I'm like, oh,
he's not in Leave It. He's the Beaver.
He's the Beaver, and I'm like, okay, now that makes sense. Of course, you're going to credit that guy. Yes.
Very small budget of $250,000. It had a box office of $3.8 million, so pretty good, successful, nice little indie movie.
Made the money back, yeah.
Absolutely. A Rotten Tomatoes score of 81% fresh for critics and a 79% fresh for audience score.
Mostly agreed.
Very small synopsis of a group of overachieving Asian American high school students become involved in various criminal activities, from creating cheat sheets to selling drugs.
Yes.
Really fascinating movie.
Really good.
Really interesting take on like the high school experience from the Asian American perspective.
Yep.
One of the things I found interesting about this movie is that, again, I've seen some conflicting reports, but I think overall it's that there was a potential investor or somebody who was originally going to invest in this movie offered Justin Lin about $1 million to finance this movie. So significantly more than the budget he had to make this. But he wanted, I'm heard specifically Macaulay Culkin, but he wanted Macaulay Culkin and or basically an all-white cast.
Right.
So this investor wanted this movie told from a white perspective.
Yes.
Which, again, like I mentioned, the story itself, I don't think requires an Asian American cast. You'd have to tweak some things. But what they really do a great job of in this movie, and again, we cannot speak personally of this, but they do a great job of kind of highlighting and doing a twist on these Asian American kind of stereotypes and caricatures. These guys are the smartest kids in school, but they're also some of the toughest. They're not afraid to take somebody down. They're pulling guns on people. They're doing drugs. Yeah. They're buying hookers. Yep. Such an interesting kind of different take on what you expect to see. And I found that really interesting.
Yeah, I did too. It's a really, really excellent story. Really well written, well directed. And we keep talking about Sung Kong a lot, but yes, he is a standout in this movie. But I do want to say the rest of the cast in this movie is absolutely excellent. It's not one of those situations where it's like he's the standout. Like everyone else is great in this movie, and they're all so good. Everyone feels real. Everyone feels like an actual character. They're all so well written, and you're right. It shows the high school perspective of Asian American kids. It's a twist on it, and it's their experience, and it's wonderful. Like
you tell this story from the perspective of white kids, and it doesn't necessarily stand out. It doesn't resonate. I mean, I'm sure his direction, Justin Lin's direction, would work, but the story packs in a little bit of an extra punch.
Yes,
because they're taking this twist. You're not expecting to see these characters
do the things they're doing.
Because
we're also used to seeing the stereotypical Asian American kid in the movies, just the smartest kid, and he has no other personality beyond that. He gives these characters personality, which is so important, and they have problems, they have issues. They're doing things that crazy high school kids do. Like they're indulging, and it's like, wow, they're
not nerds.
They're not nerds.
You know what I mean? But they're also incredibly intelligent.
Even Han, overachievers to a degree.
Even Han, who is I would say the toughest of the four main characters, he's still proven to be very intelligent, a good student in his own right.
Mm-hmm.
So
they're all good students, and they all. I mean, one of the other guys is the valedictorian of the class, and the main character is incredibly smart, but also picks up all these extracurricular activities with basketball. He's doing debate team. He's just all over the place.
They're all aiming for Ivy League schools and stuff like that. So, but at the same time, they're kind of degenerates. Pulling guns and getting kind of caught up in their own story. Mm-hmm. And they're buying their own BS. You know what I mean? Like, specifically the character of Virgil, who really has trouble, like, kind of separating himself from this lifestyle. He is the one who is eager the most to jump into it. He is, it's funny because, Derek comes to Ben, the valedictorian or whatever comes to Ben to kind of join this cheat sheet kind of scandal that Han's also involved in, and Virgil kind of has to tag along to fit in as well. Yeah. So he's kind of like, not necessarily the outcast, but he's the one that's like almost least involved or like wasn't initially invited. Mm-hmm. And he's the one that's kind of diving in the most. Yeah. Where he gets to the point that he's pulling guns on hookers. Yes. Because he wants to feel powerful and he's just so caught up in this style of I'm so cool. He's pulling guns out of nowhere. They're having intimate conversations, and he's like, "Look at my gun,"
He's pulling out his gun at every moment. It's so funny, and I liked it. I did tell you in text that I am going to defend Virgil a little bit here because you said you weren't. You thought he was a little.
He's a great character because he is the one who most buys into this lifestyle,
and dives headfirst into it.
And he's kind of.
So my perspective was this kid seemed to have been stepped on a lot in his life. That was the vibe I was getting, and when this lifestyle comes to him, he jumps in because he's never felt this before.
Well, his cousin is Han, right?
His cousin is Han, who's the coolest guy in school, clearly. Again, great hair. I want to be clear, great hair.
So when he's doing, when he has to live up to that his entire life, right? And then we see him in the beginning of the movie, like everything he does is like a screw up. He's yelled at, he's whatever. So when he gets a chance to not be that anymore, he wants to, he dives into that and does embrace that lifestyle. Yeah. I understand his character. Mm-hmm. I felt sympathy for him, but at the same time, he kind of brought, more than any of them, I felt like he brought on all of this himself.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I do agree. He brought it on to himself because he dove in so much. But I felt a lot of sympathy for him because he seemed like he did seem like an outcast to me. He seemed like he was just somebody who had been ignored a lot, who had been stepped over. He's rejected by, every girl at his school. And he's just kind of like, he gets a taste of this power and he dives in because he's like, oh my God, like finally I can start, earning some respect of some sort. Yeah. Is it this the right way to do it? Absolutely not. I don't it's not the right way to go about it, but I understood where he was coming from and I understood why he was feeling the way he was feeling.
I agree with you. I thought that the most sympathetic character in this movie actually was Han because he is this character who he is the leader. He is kind of the one who kind of sets everything up. I mean, I know Derek kind of recruits Ben, into the life, but like Han is the one who's like, we see him in the very beginning of the movie. They're scamming computer parts.
Yeah. And very quickly, can we just say, did Han have the best opening shot of a character of all time? Leaning on the car, smoking. It's the coolest, right? It's the coolest.
That's literally I literally took a picture of my TV and I went, look at this effing guy. Like, he is so cool.
Coolest opening shot of a character, just leaning on the red car, he's smoking, he's got the untucked buttoned up shirt. You're like, this guy is cool, man.
No, but so he's obviously the one who has embraced this lifestyle. Right. He's not faking this. He lives this lifestyle, right? And we see that kind of in Tokyo Drift, right? He is this kind of swindler, he's always looking out for himself, kind of, and he's compassionate, but he's always kind of looking out for himself. Yes. And he's dipping his hand and taking money literally from the Yakuza. He's not afraid to do that. Yes. No, and to see him kind of lose control of all this as these three other guys, Derek, Virgil, and Ben, are starting to kind of lose their anger and implode upon each other, and basically, they're offered this option by Steve, who is, probably the richest kid in school.
Yes.
Dating one of the most popular, best-looking girls in school, the girl that Ben has an absolute crush on.
Yep, from the very beginning.
From the very beginning, Steve is dating her. He doesn't truly appreciate her. He's not the kindest guy.
Yeah.
He's kind of cocky.
He's cheating on her, I believe.
He is absolutely cheating on her. He's very into himself. He doesn't he ignores her. He doesn't take her to school dances. He's forcing Ben to do it.
Yeah, he'll leave her hanging sometimes, or he shows up late to pick her up. He's not a good boyfriend.
No, and we see this flawed character. He offers this crew the opportunity to steal from his own parents because he wants to give them a wake-up call.
Yeah.
And they're all the four of them kind of feel like maybe this is crossing a line, but Derek kind of convinces them all to go in for it.
Yeah.
But instead of stealing from him, they were actually going to just pretend they're going to steal from him, and they were just going to basically beat him up. So
they made the decision, let's give him a wake-up call.
Yeah, and take him down and just kind of beat him up. Yeah. Right? One thing leads to another. Ben ends up bashing his head in with a baseball bat.
Best scene of this movie. I know, it's so dark, but it's the best scene of this movie. Even before that, with the gun, and it's so good, because it's tense, and you hear the gunshots go off.
Ben chooses not to be involved in the attack.
He wants to... Well, actually, so much so that... They're in the garage. Ben stays outside and literally tells Steve, "Oh, I'll be in there in a minute," and then kind of walks away. Does not go into the garage. He wants to stay out of it.
So then Han, Virgil, and Derek, and meanwhile, especially Han and Ben, they don't want to do this. They both say they don't want to do it. Han eventually gives in and just does it.
Yeah.
But Derek's able to, again, this is Virgil being, eager. He's able to coerce Virgil into doing something he doesn't necessarily, that clearly isn't the best idea.
Yeah.
And Virgil, being cocky, has this gun. The gun gets loose.
Yeah.
Steve manages to get a hold of the gun and fires off a shot that misses everybody.
Yes.
Right.
He fires at the ceiling.
Ben comes in, sees this, starts to panic.
Him and Derek are wrestling on the ground.
Yeah.
Derek and
starts to panic. Stops him, but instead of just stopping, all this anger, all this jealousy about how he's abused this, or neglected this woman, talked down to him. He snaps. He kills this guy
with a baseball
bat to the head repeatedly.
A metal baseball bat, not even not even a wooden. It's a metal bat,
and takes him out.
Yeah.
Except he's not really dead.
He's not really dead.
He's still going.
At first, you think he is. And then he kind of starts to just moan, and what leads into a great shot.
The best shot in this whole movie, Derek embraces everything, grabs him, has Virgil hold him up while Derek's shoving, what is it, the chloroform?
It's like
or
chloroform
just
into his mouth.
Into his mouth to knock him out again.
Yeah.
That's where I think Han is sympathetic, because Han is not involved in this.
He does
at
not.
All. This is crossing the line for him, right? This guy who has led this group to this point, has encouraged all these behaviors, has put these thoughts in their heads.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? When Derek and Ben back out of the cheat sheet scandal and everything and selling the drugs, he's still in it, right?
Yeah.
Han's still in it. But this is clearly Han kind of being traumatized by what he sees.
Murder is the line for him.
Absolutely. And they take him out and they bury him in the backyard. And we didn't even mention the opening scene of this movie. They do such a great job of, it starts with Virgil and Ben laying in this backyard, and they hear the cell phone ringing.
Yeah.
And they dig up this body, and you don't know.
You know who it is.
Well, you don't know who it is. You don't know if they knew the body was there, if they were surprised to find the body. I thought maybe, I knew it wasn't going to be Han, because I knew that he was coming back for Tokyo Drift.
Yeah.
But I thought, is it Derek?
Yeah.
Is it Stephanie? Is it somebody else?
Right.
Who is it?
Yeah. What is this mystery?
Yeah. And then to go back in time and then build up to that and see that, it's Steve, it's this phone call, it's Stephanie, it's this girl that that Ben wants is calling him, and he's kind of waffling back and forth of, should I call the police, should I not, should I turn this in, should I not? Virgil, again, kind of, even though he was so eager, he lets all this get to him, and he shoots himself.
He does. He essentially commits suicide.
Yeah, he ends up in the hospital.
Yeah.
Derek is the one who has kind of turned the most.
He's turned the most. Derek is unsympathetic.
He comes in, he's cracking jokes and insults at Virgil, he couldn't even kill himself right or whatever he says.
And Han, what does Han say? Doesn't even look at him. Says, get him out. He says, Ben, get him out of here before I beat him down.
You are seeing a new Han. You are seeing the Han who gives up smoking, goes to the border, and befriends Dominic Toretto.
And Dom Toretto, yes. Like, it is such a change in the character. And, and Derek leaves, and him and Ben leave. And then the most interesting part of this movie is the very end when Ben gets picked up in the car by Stephanie, is her name?
Mm-hmm, yep.
And he's in the car, and you can see, she starts mentioning, oh, Steve hasn't called me back, this, that, and the other thing. And she says, oh, here, basically she confesses, I like you too, to Ben. And they share a kiss, and then Ben's sitting there, and you can see, oh my God, is he going to tell her? And he doesn't say a word.
He kind of is clearly making the conscious decision to just let it go.
He's struggling because he's sitting in the car, but then he kind of realizes, I think to a degree he realizes he wasn't right for her anyway, and that relationship is going to end eventually. It's still so crazy that they got away with murder. As far as we know, they got away with murder. We don't know that body was ever found. We don't know what happens, because the other thing is they bury the body in the backyard, and it's the parents are going to report him missing at some point. So there's a lot of questions left unanswered at the end, but it almost feels good that it is.
Well, I think it's because they buried him in the backyard of this third party.
Yeah.
This other person.
Yeah.
I think kind of helps them, so that it's not one of the, even if they were to suspect those guys, it's not one of the four of those houses.
Yeah, it is literally.
It's just it's this other guy who's barely in the movie.
Yeah, it's this third party guy, and he's bury him in my backyard. Yeah. And
hey, $300 to bury a guy in the backyard, that's not a bad deal.
That's not bad at all. That's a good deal. It's funny because for high school students, 300 sounds like a lot.
Yeah.
And that's why it's a big deal, because you're oh wow, but for these kids, 300's a lot.
And then to talk about that ending, I love how they end it, and he kind of says, I don't know what the future holds for, us, for any of us, know, and where they will end up. And I think that really ties in perfectly
that's a reference to Han.
But it's not. But
it's not a reference,
it ends up being, because he's saying, I don't know where they're going to go and where it's going to bring them. And clearly that takes Han to Dom Toretto, to Tokyo, to to Fast 4 and 5 and 6 and and all these.
Yeah, and all the way back to Fast 9 now. Yeah. And it's so interesting to see. Yeah, you're right. It's so interesting to see where his character goes after this.
Like I said, I know that this wasn't made as a conscious decision to, this movie wasn't, when Justin Lin made this movie, probably the last thing he's thinking is, hey, that movie that just came out this last year, this is going to be a pseudo prequel to that. He's not thinking that, you know what I mean? But it ends up that he's able to do that in such a great way.
I'm proud. The character so much.
We'll probably get hung up on it a little, because I feel like some people are like, oh, it's cool, it's a prequel. But I just love that character so much.
Yeah.
And I love this film so much. I mean, the shot, like I said, they're holding that body, and Justin Lin's moving that camera around, it's just circle around those guys. And it's not an action sequence. They're not moving, but because that camera's moving, you're getting that intensity, and you feel it, and you're like, oh my God, I'm on the edge of my seat going, oh my God,
it's an excellent movie. I feel like we've talked it up enough to the point where I really feel like, seriously, seek this movie out.
If you're a fan of this franchise and you're a fan of that character, it's worth. It's honestly 2 hours. It's worth the watch.
And if you're thinking about doing these movies, and especially if you're thinking about Tokyo Drift, watch this movie before Tokyo Drift. I can't recommend this. It's a great companion piece to this movie. It really sets up the character of Han so well, and I can't recommend it enough.
And a little bit more about this movie. When Lin was struggling to finance the movie, Justin Lin found some money in a place, an unexpected
you wouldn't think this person.
Partner, MC Hammer. Yes, MC Hammer provided some of the funding, and it was like $10,000 for the movie after reading the script. And this, I think there's a not so subtle nod to MC Hammer and thanking him is that in Tokyo Drift, I believe it's at the airport or somewhere, there's a big old sign that just says MC Hammer out
Yep.
of nowhere.
Yep.
And clearly, I think when I watched that, I was like, I'm like, oh yeah, because he gave Justin Lin
Yeah.
the money.
Justin Lin, I think that was him just paying him some respect.
Yeah.
Like, he knows he wouldn't be doing this movie if it wasn't for Better Luck Tomorrow, which is great.
Absolutely. And then this is just a very interesting little tidbit. During a Q&A session at Sundance, an audience member asked a question that criticized Lin about making a movie that depicted Asian Americans negatively, called Lin irresponsible, and called the film immoral and empty. Roger Ebert, who happened to be in attendance, stood up and shouted at the man. And here's the full quote. We watched the clip, but here's kind of the full quote of what he said. What I find very offensive and condescending about your statement is nobody would say that to a bunch of white filmmakers. Mm-hmm. How could you do this to your people? This film has the right to be about these people, and Asian Americans have the right to be whatever the hell they want to be. They do not have to represent their people. Roger Ebert gave the film a full 4 out of 4 stars.
Nice.
So, clearly a very big fan, a very big defender of this movie.
Yeah, he liked it. And Roger Ebert is someone we respect here.
Absolutely.
The guy also, he loves film. We love film. Mm-hmm. He's a great guy.
No, and yeah, just to...
We don't know him, but I'm sure he was great.
But no, just the fact that...
He's not with us anymore. But
just the fact that I think he stated that very perfectly without crossing any lines. You know what I mean? Obviously he wasn't Asian American himself, but...
Yes.
He was a great defender of this film and a great defender of the belief, and I absolutely agree with him. I think it's really interesting that this film, like I mentioned earlier, Justin Lin was given an opportunity to make, 4 times the budget movie, but it had to be a white cast.
Yeah.
And I think it's interesting that he made this movie with an Asian American cast.
Yeah.
And you don't see that a lot. To this day, you're only now starting to see these movies with these Asian or all Asian American casts. You know what I mean? And, we're getting Shang-Chi's coming up soon.
Mm-hmm.
We're getting an Asian American, or an Asian superhero. I know he's Canadian, but an Asian superhero, and just, it is crazy to me that there is this belief or like this like stigma that audience don't want to see, an Asian cast or a black cast or whatever. Yeah. And that when we do have that, it's, it's a slave movie or, like set in the civil rights movement, right. Or, very kind of...
Or it's an accepted Asian American star or an Asian star like Jackie Chan.
Yeah, but even with Jackie Chan, I feel like a lot of his American movies, and I've seen the Rush Hour movies, and I like them from what I remember. I have not seen... We will probably be doing those eventually. But I remember, they do kind of poke fun at him being Asian.
Yes.
There's... I can't understand what you're saying. Your accent's so funny, type of thing.
Well, there's also... I will say, with those movies, they do make fun of him being Asian. There
also
is...
Chris Tucker.
They also flip that on Chris Tucker and make fun of him for being black too. Like they kind of focus on both of these stereotypes. Make it much better. They came back for 3 movies. I mean, they did 3 of them. I don't know if maybe that was just something they were comfortable doing.
Yeah,
I don't know.
There are funny sequences in those moments. Even the famous line in whatever, like when he says they're both screaming at each other. Do you understand what I'm what's coming out of my mouth? The delivery of the 2 actors is funny.
Yeah.
But the idea of we're making fun of somebody because they talk different is a little,
it's a little off.
It didn't age well, you know what I mean? But to see this is, they're not, these guys aren't martial artists, right?
Yep.
This movie is not set in Japan
yep.
or China,
Korea
or anywhere else, right? Yeah. It's set in America. They're not karate experts, you know what I mean? They're not whatever. They're just kids. They're teenagers.
Right. They're just
and to see
teenagers.
That a movie like that way back, in 2002 blows my mind.
Yeah.
And the fact that
they don't have offensive accents. They
no.
all just talk.
Yeah, they are
regular English. They're not told put on an accent. Nobody does that.
It's really fascinating to me. I really appreciate that he did that again. I'm not Asian,
right.
You know what I mean, but I appreciate that he is able to do that with these characters, with this movie. And just, it's interesting to me to highlight those characters, which to tie this back into the Fast and the Furious, I feel like they do highlight these cultures. And I think Justin Lin is a big part of that. We see this whole crew reunited, in 5. We have, Tyrese is back, and Ludacris, and, Sung Kang, and Gal Gadot.
Yeah.
and all these people, and we are highlighting there's white people, and there's black people, and there's Asians, or Asian Americans, and there's Hispanic characters, and Gal Gadot is an Israeli actress. You know what I mean? So to highlight
even Dwayne Johnson, Samoan.
Yeah, to highlight and again that and Hobbs and Shaw, they really highlight that culture.
Yeah.
To see that, I think that's really fascinating, and I think that it's not a coincidence that it came under Justin Lin that we're seeing that. He is a guy who he's not hiding his culture, but he blends it well into the stories that he tells.
Yep.
You know what I mean? That's fascinating for me to see.
Yeah.
So
it's amazing.
We're not going to rank Better Luck Tomorrow because it is not technically part of the franchise.
Yes, they don't consider it part of the franchise.
If we did, this may be my number one.
This may be the number one too. I
gave Better Luck Tomorrow 4.5 stars.
I gave it 4, but I think if I watched it again, I would bump it to 4.5 because I did. I've actually been struggling with that rating. I think I will bump it to 4.5 because I really did like it.
It was one of those films.
It sat with me for a few days.
Up until the ending, it was a 4-star, and then when they do the shot, I said this is a 4.5 star.
Yeah, I think I'm gonna bump it to 4.5.
So that's our thoughts on Fast and Furious Tokyo Drift and Better Luck Tomorrow. A little bonus there. Thank you for listening. Thank you to Tony as always.
Yes.
You can share your thoughts with us on Twitter at FranchiseMePod, and you can email us at franchisemepod@gmail.com. Thank you again for everybody. Join us next week. We're going to be talking about Fast and Furious.
Yes.
The fourth one.
The fourth one, not the first.
Not the first, not the Fast and the Furious.
This is
Fast and Furious.
Fast and Furious.
4. We are welcoming back Vin Diesel's Dom Toretto,
Yes.
Paul Walker's Brian O'Connor,
Yes.
Michelle Rodriguez, Jordana Brewster. Really great. Can't wait to see it. Join us next week. Thank you again, everybody, for listening. Goodbye.
Thank you. See you soon.